In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this stunning cocktail ring. You start by taking the stone and figuring out how you want it to sit and have a length of wire depending on how many loops you want, and always have a lot more than you really need. And I use a ring sizer, mark down where I want it. If you do not have a ring sizer, but have a dowel or something that is the right size, measure that out and figure out that, okay, this is where I'm going to put it. Then take one end of the wire. You can decide on half or a bit more, depending on how many coils you're actually going to do for the ring shaft versus what you're going to use to wrap around underneath the stone. So here, I want to perhaps do 5 loops around for the shaft of the ring where my finger is going to go through. And in that case, I also want to make sure that the wire that is going to go through the ring, the stone, is going to be in the middle. So some of the coil will be above and some will be below. And take your time. I shift things around. Sometimes you realize after wrapping that perhaps you want more wire on one side over the other. Take your time, shift it around. So here I'm taking a look to see what it'll look like and how much space I'm going to need. Oop, there, I've hit the light with the ring sizer. But so here I'm fairly happy with some of the wire being above and below where I'm going to wrap. And sometimes you have to adjust as you're pulling it, it gets smaller and smaller. Just remember that if you are going to do lots of wraps around the shaft like here, you're going to need it to be slightly bigger, the size, because as more of the wire you use to wrap around the shaft, the size actually gets smaller. So here I'm adjusting it. Make sure, and sometimes you don't have a good grip and you move it forward and then it gets loose. So I'm tightening. It's always good to use a pair of pliers to help you tighten. And I'm going to make sure that it is where I want. And I flip up the shorter wire. That locks it in to place. And it's a good idea to let you know now that I should have left more wire there to do more times around. But basically this shorter wire, all it does is it locks all of the shafts in place. The shorter wire, that one, locks in all of the wires that make up the shaft in place. So here, it would have been better if I was able to get a bit more coil and get my pliers around that wire better, get a better grip. Sometimes I have the tendency to be overly cheap with my wire to save on materials, and that's not always the best thing. But here I'm checking again. And the other thing worth noting is if I wanted the shaft, the band, to be flat, then I want to keep it all flat and press down on the wire that wraps around each of those wires that make up the shaft. So make sure that it's tight and adjust along the way to make sure that you haven't made the ring smaller and smaller. And that's something I have a tendency to do. So now that that end is locked in, on the other side, I want to do the same thing. I go over the wires that are around the shaft like that. I just keep wrapping around a couple of times. And remember that the thicker the wire that you have, actually the harder it is to get a smooth and tight wrap without the guide of pliers to feed the wire through. So sometimes I get impatient, I just pull the wire and kinks form, so you have to smoothen them out. So now I'm checking again, and I might have made it a bit too tight, so I have to flatten out. And sometimes you have to loosen it a bit. Okay, I'm going to adjust and straighten. And the type of wire you use really doesn't matter. Same principle applies. The softer the wire, actually the easier it is. So here, I'm finding, because it's thicker wire, I do have to pull a little bit, feed a little bit, and there is a slight kink forming. Straighten that out before you work further. And that is the case with all wire work. And the other thing is, over time, when you wire around several times, the wire gets a little bit crookedy, as you see. Feel free to straighten that with the side of your pliers, or if there isn't enough, use the pliers to straighten out and smooth. It does look much better than if it's all wrinkly, and it's hard to try to fix that later. So as you go, straighten out the wires. And now I bring it around and create that base, the support underneath the stone. Sometimes you'll find the more wire you have, it looks like it's got a setting, which I like. And before you build it too much, put it on the ring sizer or your doweling and then wrap, because you might be building on too much underneath or around, and it would not be comfortable. So at least this way, when you wear it, you'll be comfortable. And continue wire wrapping as much as you see fit. And this is where the longer wire you use, the better, because you have more options. I think I've used quite a bit of wire, so that's good. I could have had more, but I'm happy with that. And I have another inch left on the side here. So what I want to do there is to wrap around the other side, the base, and then tuck it in. And in here I can decide, okay, I could tuck it onto the other side. So you could see the balance. I could have finished on this side, but I see that actually I can continue further. So I put it right through into the nest of wires that you see and pull it through the other side, and clip is always good. And then just pinch down so that it's hidden and it's not going to be scratchy. Sometimes you'll find that you made a mistake. You can uncoil. Don't worry about that. Make sure that the important thing for me is that there's right and left balance and it's a comfortable fit. Then oftentimes I look through, especially if it's the first one, you've not done the same one before. I make sure that it is balanced, and from every angle it's visually pleasing, and there isn't a part that sticks out or is lopsided. Then I look to make sure that I'm very happy. Sometimes you have to adjust. And the other thing is, if you have wire that is hard or thin and hard, it uncoils much more easily than dead soft wire. So in that case, you along the way would just have to pinch it to guide it. As anytime you put a kink or a pinch, it stays a lot better. So here I'm happy. I had threaded through along the coil already, and now I'm just going to trim, and I leave a little bit because I'm going to tuck that into the nest and then pinch down like there. So I've pinched it all in, and when you actually clip the small bit, curl it so that when you push in, it naturally goes into the nest. And I'm quite happy with that. And you could use a much bigger stone, more wire, however which way, and you can actually use multiple stone beads. And this is the finished product. If you have found this video to be useful, please like and subscribe. And in the comment section, let me know if there is anything you'd like to see me make.